Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Love Yourself, Love Your Life. Yeah, that's the name of the book, and you got to pick that up. And our friend Dr. Ann Creekmore joining us here live. Besides being an author, she's here to talk about the work she does from individual couples, family, group therapy, hypnosis, psychological evaluations for adolescents, adults, and so many. So we're here and excited to have her here, and it's psychologistinvirginia.com. That's our website. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Ann Creekmore. How are you?
Good, Jill. How are you?
I'm doing well. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Was it everything you expected?
Probably, yes. It was nice. How about you?
Great. It was fantastic. Thank you for asking. We are excited to have you back here. I know holidays are upon us with Thanksgiving, with Christmas, with Hanukkah, with the New Year, and that also leads to a lot of mental health duress and stress and anxiety and certain conditions. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about mental health today. Do you want to jump right into that?
Sure. Do you have anything in particular that you want to talk about today?
Well, bipolar disorder. And then there's something that you mentioned that I never heard about. So maybe you can, maybe some of our listeners are unfamiliar with the term too. It was una something. Could you share that too?
Sure. Well, there are two types of depression, and then it's a good time to talk about this because sometimes people do become depressed over, the holidays. Some of that can be emotional, like anniversary grief reactions, with family members not there, losses, or things kind of get triggered, missing people, and that's kind of the emotional grieving process getting triggered. But also, there are chemical imbalances that are, and that's what you're talking about, the unipolar I mentioned versus bipolar depression.
Yes.
Yes. Now, there's the two types of depressions that are both chemical imbalances that can be treatable in a variety of ways, like medication, is cognitive behavioral therapy helps, and so on. But the unipolar depression is what we usually think of as depression. It's when is someone who's feeling depressed and they go to their PCP or the family physician and let them know they've been feeling depressed, and they can, even their family physician can prescribe for them, a SSRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor medication like Paxil, Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, Luvox, depending on that each of them has some different qualities to it, but they're all for raising your serotonin, which is your positive brain neurotransmitter, positive mood brain neurotransmitter. But there's the other kind of depression, which is the bipolar depression. Unipolar is just the flat depression. You're just stay kind of in the depressed state, maybe withdrawn and don't have energy, fatigue, don't want to do anything, and can't do much, sleep a lot, maybe more 12 hours or so, 14, maybe even 10. But the bipolar depression is a person who has learned, usually when they're younger, actually, to actually bring themselves out of this depression. They're both a depression. But the one who has bipolar has figured out how to get themselves out of it by they don't have to go to a bar to get a euphoric cocktail. They can just put, kind of spy something shiny, put their running shoes on, and just start chasing something exciting. And that will actually lift, they'll get manic. You've heard of that, like getting manic or getting agitated. And they're actually releasing a lot of these brain neurotransmitters, their serotonin, their dopamine, their adrenaline, norepinephrine, and so on. They're able to release their own cocktail and kind of temporarily pull themselves out of this depression. And so that's the difference to let you know. But what goes up must come down. So even though they might, just find something that, kind of pleasures themselves and they feel good momentarily, of course, those brain neurotransmitters go up and then they deplete. And a lot of times when they have just chase something shiny, it wasn't a well thought out plan of action, and sometimes people with bipolar, will act out in a sense, they'll overspend or overshop maybe they'll have act out sexually, or be unfaithful or something, and just or be on the go so much they completely exhaust themselves, and deplete themselves, don't sleep, as well, maybe only sleep 3 or 4 hours. And then, then they're exhausted later on after going through this constant process. And when a person goes, what can happen too, when the person goes to their PCP and says they're depressed, and then the thought is to give them an antidepressant, if they'd like to take one. They don't necessarily say, well, yeah, I'm in a depressed slump now, but of course last week I was go. I finished all my projects. I made 3 new girlfriends. I only was sleeping 3 hours a night. Maybe they'll mention that, and doctor doesn't exactly, which is important. You should mention that to your doctor if you do have the up and down moody depression or the bipolar depression, because it's a different type of medication than you would take just for the flat, what we think of as the depression, the unipolar depression, because with the unipolar, you're trying to just bring up their serotonin. And that's what an SSRI or the usual antidepressant would do. But when you have a bipolar depression, you can kind of lift your own self out, and but going up and then, then coming down and so on. You actually need a more what's called an atypical antidepressant, like Wellbutrin is one, or bupropion, that will kind of do with different neurotransmitters. But people have to have something with it, a mood stabilizer. Like a lot of the gold standard for bipolar depression is lithium, because the idea is that a person is the catalyst for brain neurotransmitters to work is lithium. And lithium is a mineral that we actually absorb through our foods and our water. But for some reason, some people, their water supply is low, and they don't get enough, or what they eat doesn't have enough, or they don't process the lithium or whatever. But so they have found that the lithium will actually be, if they take it in medication, that it actually does that. So then the brain neurotransmitters start to flow better and they're more mood stabilized. And I do know the integrative psychiatrists I've worked with will actually recommend taking even a supplement of lithium orotate, which is, you can get it on Amazon now, just like everything else these days. And because it is something you're just absorbing from your food and your water, so that you maybe can just take a little supplement, and not immediately go to having to take medication lithium, although if that's what you need, then that's what we need to do. Your doctor says so.
No.
But yeah. So I know I've given you a lot of food for thought there. You probably had some questions. Let me let
No,
you.
well, yeah, because okay, I've heard that it's, bipolar is something that I've heard of, and I've heard that my father probably has it, never been diagnosed. Could you just give me more specific signs of, the difference? We'll start with bipolar. What are some of the things that you would notice about someone's behavior?
Okay. If it's the bipolar, they used to not, when I was in graduate school, they said that didn't start until middle age, because people with the bipolar depression, and it isn't, they know now, it's now the early 21, they're starting to peak into it, and they can even have it as a child.
Mm-hmm.
But these people look more functional in a sense than
Okay.
a person who's just depressed. I mean, someone's depressed and they can't get up, can't do anything, they're just sleeping all the time, and they look depressed. Whereas the person with the bipolar depression goes through phases when they're manic, or they're up and they're able to, they can be kind of on, can have 4 days to a couple of weeks of just being really up and on the go and working and doing projects and relating and being social,
Yeah.
and so it doesn't, so they don't look it, then they do kind of go into depression as well, although to some extent, I think they are used to being up and they kind of hide it. They get more
Yeah.
irritable,
Yep.
and they really would just, when I've spoken to people that have it, it's like at that point they just really want to be like the unipolar depression. They just want to, not do anything. They just feel like can't do anything, just totally fatigued and so on. Their neurotransmitters depleted, and so, but they don't, and they just get real irritable. So a lot of times that may be something that you would notice, irritable outbursts. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. Go
Is
ahead.
it true that when the certain phases of the moon do affect people mentally, especially with bipolar?
Well, the interesting thing about the full moon is that, from what I understand, having attended the National Council for Geocosmic Research meetings for decades, which is kind of an understanding of the astrology in general, like the mood, the
Hmm.
moon, and how it affects things. It's actually the gibbous moon right before the full
Okay.
moon that has a shaky effect.
Oh,
And
wow.
the full moon is when it manifests right after that. And when people wind up in the hospital, or different things occur. But it's more like that, the initial phase before it, and then the outcome phase is when we see that. And there is research to show that there are,
Maybe.
correlations. That's considered to be causative with the full moon, like affects the tides and affects, but it's the one right before it, actually, that is one
Can
thing.
you can you be cured of mental health illnesses? Or do we just have medication and therapy to help us through? Is it possible?
Absolutely. There are different kinds of disorders like complex PTSD, which can look like bipolar because people are kind of switching into these
Yeah.
different moods, but more quickly, not. Although with bipolar 2, there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is the one most people kind of thought about, and where, if you've had a real manic episode of, where you didn't sleep and your thoughts are racing, you're distractible, and you're acting out in ways that can be kind of dangerous and maybe even getting, aggressive or whatever. That is different than the bipolar 2, which is a milder version, and the mood swings occur, maybe even through the day, some where you might feel on top of the world for a little while and then
Yeah.
get really super anxious and panic attacks, and then you can go into a depressive and or irritable. So it's more up and down, and it kind of it's not as clear with the episodes. um, I'm sorry, I wasn't answering your question. What was
No,
your
it's
question?
fine. I don't remember. My question was about being cured. Yeah. Can you cure
Yes,
yourself?
yes. Well, you have to think everybody's got stuff, right? So
Hmm.
and some people have to take some medication or supplements or do certain things to maintain their health in any way. And they get,
Yep.
what's the difference between, high blood pressure and you have to take your medication, or a bipolar chemical imbalance and you take some medication? Do you know what I'm saying? In
Yeah.
other words, for the stigma of it. So it's not always that you can do without a medication, but if you can do the medication and it controls things, and you get a nice pill box, so you make sure you actually take them every day, because that makes a big difference, then that in a sense is kind of being healed. It's like you figured the problem out, and it's like you brush your teeth,
Yeah.
and you don't have to get problems and go to the dentist. You take that little pill, or and then you don't have to. And one thing I wanted to say before I totally forget is, I mentioned, and I don't know if it's good for me to mention different medications or not, but I mentioned the Wellbutrin. But what I wanted to say about that is that sometimes that is something that is given for depression, even with people that have a unipolar depression, and
Okay.
kind of off-label good for ADHD, just as well, helps focus and so on, because it affects different neurotransmitters. Um, but it's one of those that if you take it, if you have the bipolar depression, that you have to take an additional mood stabilizer on the side with it, or it will make you worse. They have found that the SSRIs medications, what I mentioned earlier, or Wellbutrin, that one, that they either they're contraindicated as they
Okay.
said for bipolar depression. So it's important for the physician or psychiatrist, of course, to really go through the diagnostic statistical manual of mental disorders and really look at the criteria, which I didn't give completely or anything a moment ago, but to look through it, when you're with a client or patient, and make sure that they don't meet the requirement for bipolar depression, because those others are either don't do, they're not effective, they don't really help, or they can make it worse as well. Because remember, the person with the
Yep.
bipolar is able to kind of lift their own neurotransmitters up.
True.
And then if you're just adding another neurotransmitter, they're going to like it, maybe even, like, oh, okay, I got something else to pop for a little while, but you're not doing anything about the mood stabilization. Um, so yeah, and there was even a study I can mention where they have found about the lithium that there was a greater crime rate in this study between
Oh,
the two water supplies to these two communities. One had a lot of lithium in it, and one
okay.
was low on it. And the aggressive crime rate was higher in the one where there wasn't much lithium in the water supply. So they've done studies and to kind of support this use of lithium as helpful.
Well, also let's remind everyone how we can reach out to you, Dr. Ann Creekmore. Could you share?
Oh, sure. You can reach me at psychologistinvirginia.com, as you mentioned. I think you said last time there was a problem kind of getting into that, but so we kind of looked at it, and I think it's kind of shows up, but not the whole website for some reason. But right down toward the bottom, it says click here, and you can get right into the website. So I don't know if that helps at all for
Well,
future. I know you said
it's
it was hard.
now I'm trying to click on it now, and now I have no reception, so I can't even tell you if it works
Uh,
again. But I'm sure it does. We got
just
plenty of
a
ways to
little
contact
tip
you.
in case that helps.
We
But
got it.
yes, and even though, and of course, even with bipolar, which is a chemical imbalance that you may have to take something for, it's like a lot of conditions. There's a lot of therapy that really helps you to get balance in your life, learn how to communicate and express healthily, assertively, and to get yourself emotionally stable as well, just through talk therapy.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much
Mhm,
for sharing that. Now, also
mhm.
mental health struggles, a lot of people dealing with that for the holidays. It is a more stressful time and anxious time. And even with what about things like anxiety and stress? Those are mental
Right,
health conditions too, right? What can we do
correct,
about those?
right.
And how do you deal with the in-laws at the holidays? I don't even have in-laws, but I'm just saying, I'm making a joke because it always gets more stressful when you have to go somewhere and some families don't get along and it's not an easy thing.
Right, right. Well, if we kind of keep in mind, that we can only change ourselves, we really can't change others. I mean, we can learn how to healthily express to others, and then maybe work out win win things with them. But if you can stay at that level of love and forgiveness, and trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, understand what they're going through, work on it's an opportunity to work on yourself. We can either be having fun or we're learning, right? So in that case, if there's some friction, it's kind of like a diamond needs friction to be created, right? And we might need a little friction to learn how to better ourselves, like how to, I think we talked a little bit about like the breathing and, getting yourself in a calm state and different strategies to kind of put yourself in a good frame of mind. And that can be look at it as an opportunity to work even more in making yourself a better person.
Got it. And also with the holidays upon us, what other things are we also communicating poorly, or we heighten stress in relationships? Because I know you work with individuals and couples as well with this too.
Hmm. Can you give me an example of something that you were thinking about? Like,
Well, yeah, totally. Around the holidays, I find everyone's stressed and then there's no time for each other. And you get a lot of couples bickering and fighting because everyone's always busy in their own world doing their own thing. I'm looking at my sister and her husband, for example, right? Because they recently got into a fight. And it turns out, I think it's because it's the high stress time because they're running to the kids' events and the Christmas, the holiday church pageant, the practices. They're all trying to run around and they're not getting along as much. And here I am.
mhm,
I'm no one to give advice to someone with, because I'm not in a relationship. But I said, don't you have to make time for each other? I mean, how? And they're like, well, we don't have time. We can't make time. We're too busy. We're this and so I ended up taking them to go see the Radio City Christmas Spectacular and their kids. So we all went to the city last week, which was nice to do something together as a family. But the
mhm.
big joke was that stressed them out more. Like they need alone time.
Right, right. Well, you bring up a good point. I don't know if you're familiar with the five love languages quiz. Have I
Yes. Tell me that. I've heard about, can you share, yeah, share what that is? Yes, because everyone needs a certain type of love and also gives a certain, could you share that? Do you know the specifics on it?
Absolutely, because I generally get all couples to fill that out as if they come for couples therapy. That's one of the first things that I would do, besides all the assessments, to understand what their individual problems are, so to make sure we can work and get those helped. But that is the idea is that there's like they have it as five main love languages. And people are kind of like a TV, like in the old days, where if you walked over to the TV and it was off and you started pressing the volume button, nothing's going to happen. You start pressing the channel button, nothing happens. You got to press the power button. And people are like that. You have to press the button that makes them feel loved. You have to
Mm-hmm.
understand what their love language is. And usually we're going to do for other people what works, what is our love language, because we want to
Yeah.
love what they feel this makes us feel loved. So we're going to do that for the other person. What happens is if that's not their, top two, I usually look at the top two love languages. What is their bottom one? And it's nice, but it doesn't really, turn the power on. So they don't really ever feel the love. I think the therapist who kind of and came up with this had set gives an example in his book, The Five Love Languages. There's a bunch of them. I can do it for your children, couples, all kinds of relationships. Said that he had a man come to his workshops, which he did, to help people understand what their love languages were. And his wife didn't come. But
Mm-hmm.
when he left, he said to himself, you know what? I think she might like gifts. That's one of the five. So every day when he got back, he gave her a different gift and not expensive, nothing. He picked up her fat cookie from the bakery when he was at the mall. The next day he saw some little wildflowers. He brought them in, a little bouquet. And the next day he just wrote a little card or something. By the end of the week, she says, he loves me. And he never really felt that, even though he was a
Ah,
provider. So the reason I mentioned this, or what came to me about your, did you say it was your
sister
sister?
and
Yeah, sister,
brother-in-law. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
was that some people, one of the love languages is called quality time. And quality time, I call that one kind of a blessing and a curse because, I mean, if you do this, it's almost like anything can be healed. I've had couples in where there've been infidelity for a year and the person betrayed their main love language was quality time. And once he started doing that, then it was forgiven. It was like, wow, this is
Yeah.
easy, I mean, which is fine, but quality time involves time. It's a little different than picking up some wildflowers as you're going down the street, or words of affirmation saying I love you, or you look nice, or you did a good job. It's quality time takes actually some time, some alone time, like you were talking about, where you
Mm-hmm.
have to actually have that time. Kind of call it and not be negative about it, but like kind of worthless hanging out time, like you did when you were kids, and you just get together with your friends.
Wow.
You're just hanging out, and you get along. You're accepted, and it doesn't have to be money spent, but you're spending that time, having the time, like we don't,
Mm-hmm.
have when you it's the holidays and you're working and you have children, and it's hard to find that 2 hours a day to
It
spend
is.
to fulfill that quality time quotient. And people who need the quality time, if they don't get it, it's almost like an addiction. It's almost like that they're
Yeah.
hanging on by their fingernails, and they start to feel mistrusting and envious. And is this person, does he like her better than me? And it then the
You
fights
nailed it.
start.
You nailed it on the head.
Yeah, yeah, I got that. And the fights start up. And then, and quality time can't have a fight in it. I mean, even if you're going out
No.
to a nice dinner and then you have sort of an
Yep.
argument, that cross that out, that wasn't quality time. It's because you need to have like at least 3 days in a row of a couple hours, and then maybe the fourth day you can take off. And
Yep.
then you got to get back on every day. But the nice thing is it doesn't have to be an expense, and you can't like just say, well, we're going to go out for the weekend to Williamsburg. That's where, I would
Yep.
live. But, you can't do that. You have to have that consistently every day, and it has to be non-critical, So that part is something to make. If you have that, just got to look at your schedules and kind of figure out where you're going to have your time. And it could be even cleaning the garage, if that's what you wanted to do. Like, oh gosh, I wish we want to get rid of this stuff and we've been wanting to do a long time. Let's hang out in the afternoon
Do
on
it
the
together.
weekend.
Yeah.
Do it
All right.
together. And that can be quality time. It doesn't,
Well,
there's nothing particular.
thank you.
Yeah.
We must run.
Well,
We're able to stay a few minutes later today, which is good.
oh, I'm sorry.
Tamika, don't be sorry. But I'm glad to have you here. Remind us how we can contact you, please.
Yes. Psychologist in Virginia, all the words spelled out.com has all my information on it. My email and my phone, and has all my website about my clinical practice here in Virginia, and my books and things. So hopefully you can get into it. I think my practice manager said that the problem is it kind of shows up, but then you can't do anything, but it has somewhere in little teeny fine print. If you click, it'll go into the next section. So hopefully you can get it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, stay tuned, everyone. We appreciate you being here, Dr. Ann Creekmore. Pick up the book. Great for Christmas gifts, stocking stuffers, right?
Absolutely. It would be great. Yes.
All
Love
right.
yourself, love your life.
Perfect. Thank you again. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.